October 23, 1954. Platform 7 at Union Station, Chicago. The air was thick with coal smoke and the metallic screech of wheels against rails. Passengers huddled in their coats against the autumn chill, waiting for the midnight express to depart. Train 439, the Continental Limited, was scheduled to leave at 11:58 p.m., carrying 97 passengers and 6 crew members on a routine overnight journey to New York City. At exactly 11:57 p.m., conductor Thomas Whitfield blew his whistle. The locomotive's engine rumbled to life, steam billowing into the cold night air. Passengers pressed their faces against windows, waving to loved ones on the platform. The train began to move, slowly at first, then gathering speed as it disappeared into the darkness beyond the station lights. That was the last time anyone saw Train 439. No crash, no wreckage, no distress signals. Just silence. For 70 years, the disappearance remained one of America's most perplexing mysteries. That is, until a crisp October morning in 2024, when something impossible happened. Something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about time, space, and the boundaries of reality itself. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me tell you what really happened to Train 439. The Continental Limited wasn't just any train. It was one of the crown jewels of American rail travel in the 1950s. Sleek, modern, equipped with dining cars, sleeping compartments, and observation decks that offered panoramic views of the American countryside. For many passengers, riding the Continental was an experience in itself, a journey that combined luxury with the romance of rail travel. Among the 97 passengers aboard that October night were families heading east for the holidays, businessmen traveling for important meetings, and young couples embarking on adventures. There was Margaret Hayes, a 32-year-old schoolteacher from Chicago, traveling to visit her sister in Philadelphia. She had written in her diary earlier that evening about her excitement for the journey, about watching the stars from the observation car, about arriving in time for her niece's birthday. There was Robert Chen, 45, a decorated Korean War veteran who worked as an engineer. His wife had packed him sandwiches for the trip, kissed him goodbye at the platform, and promised to meet him at Grand Central Terminal in 16 hours. She never got that chance. There was 8-year-old Sarah Morrison, traveling with her parents to see her grandmother for the first time. She clutched a stuffed rabbit her mother had bought her, pressing her face against the window as the city lights began to fade. Her father, James Morrison, had promised her they'd count the stars together once they reached the countryside. And there was conductor Thomas Whitfield, 58 years old, a 30-year veteran of the railroad. He knew every mile of the route by heart, every station, every signal, every curve in the tracks. His colleagues described him as meticulous, reliable, the kind of man who checked his pocket watch 3 times before departure to ensure perfect punctuality. The train's route was straightforward: Chicago to New York via Toledo, Cleveland, and Buffalo. Approximately 800 miles of track that thousands of trains had traveled safely for decades. Weather reports that evening showed clear skies, no storms, no fog. Track inspections conducted earlier that day had found no issues. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. At 12:17 a.m., Train 439 passed through the small town of Elkhart, Indiana. The night watchman at the station, Harold Briggs, noted its passage in his logbook. On schedule, moving at normal speed, all lights functioning. Briggs would later tell investigators that he'd watched the train disappear around the eastern bend, its red tail lights fading into the darkness like dying embers. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Continental Limited. When Train 439 failed to arrive at its first scheduled stop in Toledo at 4:30 a.m., station managers initially assumed a minor delay, mechanical issues, perhaps, or an unscheduled stop for some routine matter. But when radio contact couldn't be established, concern began to mount. By 6 a.m., search operations were underway. Railroad officials sent crews along the entire route from Chicago to Toledo, searching for any sign of the missing train. They checked every mile of track, every siding, every rail yard. They contacted every station along the route, Every crossing guard, every maintenance crew. Nobody had seen Train 439. The investigation expanded rapidly. By noon on October 24th, hundreds of searchers were combing the route. They used every resource available in 1954. Spotter planes flew overhead. Ground crews walked the tracks. Local police departments coordinated searches of surrounding areas. They looked for derailments, crashes, any evidence of what could have happened to an entire train carrying over 100 people. They found nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no debris. The tracks showed no signs of damage or disturbance. It was as if Train 439 had simply vanished into thin air somewhere between Elkhart, Indiana, and Toledo, Ohio. Margaret Hayes' sister waited at Philadelphia Station for 2 days before accepting that something terrible had happened. Robert Chen's wife refused to leave Grand Central Terminal, convinced her husband would walk through the doors at any moment, apologizing for the delay. Sarah Morrison's grandmother sat by her window in upstate New York, watching for a family that would never arrive. The FBI was called in. Special Agent William Crawford, who had investigated dozens of major cases, declared it the most baffling disappearance he'd ever encountered. "You can't hide a train," he told reporters. "It's not like a car or a person. We're talking about hundreds of tons of steel, 97 passengers, crew members, luggage, cargo. Something that size doesn't just disappear." But it had. Theories multiplied as days turned to weeks. Some suggested mechanical failure had caused the train to derail into a lake or river. Those searches of every body of water along the route found nothing. Others proposed hijacking. Though who could hijack an entire train, and to what purpose? A few whispered about Soviet involvement, Cold War paranoia fueling speculation about communist plots and secret weapons. The most persistent theory involved a catastrophic derailment into a deep ravine or forest area, with the wreckage somehow missed by search teams. But the route between Elkhart and Toledo was relatively flat farmland with few areas where a train could disappear from view. Every ravine, every wooded area, every possible hiding place was searched and researched. By December 1954, the official investigation was scaled back. The railroad company declared all passengers and crew deceased, though without bodies. Families couldn't hold proper funerals. Death certificates were issued based on presumed death. Insurance claims were processed. Memorial services were held in churches across the Midwest and East Coast. Thomas Whitfield's widow kept his conductor's uniform hanging in the closet until her own death in 1983, never believing her husband was truly gone. Margaret Hayes' diary, with its final entry about stargazing from the observation car, was donated to the Chicago Historical Society. The Morrison family planted a tree in their backyard for Sarah, watching it grow tall and strong over the decades, a living memorial to the daughter who never came home. The case became a footnote in American history. Books about unsolved mysteries devoted chapters to the vanishing train. Conspiracy theorists proposed increasingly elaborate explanations involving time warps, alien abductions, and government cover-ups. But without evidence, without bodies, without any physical trace, the truth remained elusive. Union Station continued its operations. Platform 7, where Train 439 had departed on that October night, saw thousands of trains come and go over the following decades. The railroad industry evolved, diesel replacing steam, modern equipment replacing the elegant trains of the 1950s. The world moved on, and Train 439 faded into legend, until October 23, 2024, exactly 70 years to the day after the Continental Limited disappeared. Station manager David Martinez was conducting his morning rounds at Union Station when he received an urgent call from the Platform 7 supervisor. There was a problem with the electronic boards. They were showing an incoming train on track 7, but no train was scheduled for that platform at 6:47 a.m. Martinez assumed it was a computer glitch, a common enough occurrence with the aging station systems. He headed down to Platform 7 to reset the board manually, his coffee growing cold in his hand as he descended the stairs. The platform was nearly empty at that early hour. A few commuters waited for the 7:15 to Milwaukee, scrolling through their phones, oblivious to the world around them. Martinez approached the electronic board, already reaching for his maintenance key, when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong in the modern world. The deep, throaty whistle of a steam locomotive. He froze. That sound hadn't been heard in Union Station in over 40 years. Steam engines were museum pieces now. Restored antiques that ran on tourist lines. Not working trains in active stations. But the sound was unmistakable. And it was getting closer. Martinez turned toward the tunnel entrance, where trains emerged from the darkness into the station's light. What he saw made his coffee cup slip from his fingers, shattering on the concrete platform. A train was emerging from the tunnel. But not just any train. This was a vintage locomotive from the 1950s, its polished steel gleaming under the station lights, steam billowing from its stack in great white clouds. Passenger cars followed, their windows glowing with warm interior light, exactly like the trains that had operated when his grandfather worked at this station decades ago. The Continental Limited, Train 439, was pulling into Platform 7. The locomotive's brakes engaged with a metallic screech that sent shivers down Martinez's spine. The train slowed slower, until it came to a complete stop exactly where trains had stopped 70 years ago. Before the platform renovations, before the track realignments, before everything had changed. Martinez couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. The few commuters on the platform had looked up from their phones, faces reflecting the same shock and confusion. Then the doors opened. Passengers began to disembark. Men in suits and fedoras, women in elegant dresses and pearls, children clutching old-fashioned toys. They stepped onto the platform looking confused, disoriented, squinting in the bright modern lights. An elderly conductor was the last to emerge, his uniform immaculate, his conductor's watch in his hand. He looked around the platform with wide eyes, taking in the electronic boards, the modern architecture, the commuters in their 21st century clothing staring at him with open mouths. "Excuse me," the conductor said to Martinez, his voice trembling slightly. "This is Union Station, Chicago. We're scheduled to depart for New York at 11:58 p.m. I need to check our arrival time. We may have been delayed." Martinez found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What's the date?" The conductor checked his watch again, then looked up with growing concern. "October 23rd, 1954. We departed just past midnight. Why? Has something happened?" David Martinez pulled out his phone with shaking hands and showed the conductor the screen. The date read, October 23rd, 2024. The conductor stared at the phone for a long moment. Then his legs gave out, and he sat heavily on a nearby bench, the conductor's watch slipping from his fingers. Behind him, passengers were beginning to realize something was wrong. The station didn't look right. The people didn't look right. Everything was wrong. A woman in her early 30s, wearing a traveling suit and holding a small overnight bag, approached Martinez hesitantly. "Sir, I'm Margaret Hayes. I'm supposed to meet my sister in Philadelphia. Can you tell me where I can catch my connecting train?" Martinez looked at her, this woman who should be over 100 years old if she was still alive, but who stood before him looking exactly as she had in the 1954 missing persons report he'd seen in the station's historical archives. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I think you should sit down. There's something you need to know." Within 30 minutes, Union Station was in lockdown. Police had sealed off Platform 7. Federal agents were on their way. Medical teams had been called to examine the passengers and crew, who insisted they had departed Chicago less than 8 hours ago, not 70 years. News of impossible arrivals spread like wildfire. By 9 a.m., every major news network had crews outside Union Station. Social media exploded with theories, speculation, and demands for answers. The story was trending worldwide within the hour. 1,954 train returns after 70 years. Passengers haven't aged a day. Dr. Sarah Whitmore, a temporal physicist from MIT, was among the first scientists to arrive. She had studied theoretical time anomalies for decades, but never expected to encounter actual evidence. As she walked through Train 439, her instruments detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist, she kept whispering to herself, "This isn't possible. This shouldn't be possible." The passengers were transported to a secure facility for medical evaluation and debriefing. Every single person aboard, including the crew, showed no signs of aging beyond the 8 hours they believed had passed. Their clothes were from 1954. Their belongings were from 1954. Even the food in the dining car was fresh, as if it had been prepared hours ago, not decades. Blood tests showed normal results for healthy individuals of their stated ages. But carbon dating of their clothing, their luggage, even their hair, confirmed these items were indeed 70 years old. The passengers existed in a state that defied every known law of physics and biology. Robert Chun, the Korean War veteran, broke down when shown a photograph of his wife. She had died in 2003, having spent 49 years as a widow, never remarrying, never giving up hope that her husband might somehow return. He stared at her aged face in the photo, then looked at his own reflection, still 45 years old, and wept for the life they'd lost. Sarah Morrison, the 8-year-old girl with the stuffed rabbit, was told that her grandmother had waited every day by that window until her death in 1987, that her parents, if they were to survive this, would be reunited with a world that had buried them long ago. Margaret Hayes asked about her sister. Investigators found that her sister had lived to be 94, passing away peacefully in 2018. She had never stopped searching for answers about Margaret's disappearance, had funded private investigations well into her 80s, had kept Margaret's room exactly as she'd left it. The families of those who had waited were contacted. Robert Chen's daughter, now 68 years old, rushed to Chicago to meet the father she'd never known. She was older than her dad. Margaret Hayes' nephew, son of the sister she'd been traveling to see, was brought to the facility. He carried with him the diary she'd written in, entries about stars and train journeys, about a niece's birthday she'd never attended. Thomas Whitfield, the conductor, was told his wife had kept his uniform for 29 years after his disappearance. He asked to see it, held the old fabric in his hands, and wept for the woman who had loved him enough to wait a lifetime. But questions remained. Where had they been for 70 years? The passengers had no memory of anything unusual. They remembered boarding the train, remembered it departing on schedule, remembered the journey through the night as perfectly normal. There was no white light, no strange sensation, no indication that anything extraordinary had occurred. It was just a train ride. Margaret Hayes told investigators, "I was reading my book in the observation car. I looked up when we pulled into what I thought was Toledo, but it was Chicago again. I didn't understand why we turned around." The train itself became the focus of intense scientific scrutiny. Every inch of track 439 was examined for evidence of temporal displacement. Physicist Dr. James Thornton detected residual energy signatures that matched theoretical models of closed time-like curves, but he had no explanation for how they had formed or how they had been sustained for 70 years. According to our understanding of physics, Thornton told a press conference, "What happened to train 439 is impossible." But it happened anyway. These people were somehow caught in a temporal loop, existing outside normal space-time for 7 decades before being returned to our timeline at the exact moment they left. The locomotive's engine was examined by a team of engineers who found something extraordinary. The coal in the firebox was still burning, still producing steam, exactly as it had been when the train departed in 1954. By all laws of thermodynamics, this was impossible. But the fire continued to burn, sustained by forces nobody could explain. Inside the passenger cars, newspapers from October 23, 1954 lay on seats where they'd been left. Coffee in dining car cups was still warm. A child's coloring book showed a picture half-finished, crayons scattered nearby. Every detail was perfectly preserved, as if the train had existed in a bubble where time simply didn't pass. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came from the train's clocks. Every clock aboard train 439, from the conductor's pocket watch to the wall clocks in the passenger cars, had stopped at exactly 12:17 a.m. The moment Harold Briggs, the night watchman in Elkhart, had noted the train's passage in his logbook. That was the moment train 439 had slipped out of normal time. The government faced an unprecedented crisis. What do you do with over 100 people who legally died 70 years ago? Their death certificates had been issued, Their estates had been settled. Their social security numbers had been retired. In the eyes of the law, they didn't exist. But they were standing right there, alive, unchanged, demanding to know what had happened to their lives. The decision was made at the highest levels. The passengers and crew of Train 439 would be given new identities, new social security numbers, new lives. They would be compensated for everything they'd lost, though no amount of money could replace 70 years of missing time. Some passengers chose to stay in Chicago. Robertson moved in with his daughter, struggling to adapt to a world where his little girl was now a grandmother herself. They spent long evenings together, learning about the life his wife had lived without him, crying over photos of grandchildren he'd never known existed. Margaret Hayes tried to visit her sister's grave, but broke down at the cemetery gates. Her nephew took her to his mother's old house, showed her the room that had been kept like a shrine. Margaret's clothes still hung in the closet, her books still lined the shelves. "She never stopped believing you'd come home," the nephew said. Sarah Morrison and her parents faced perhaps the hardest adjustment. Their families were gone. The world they'd known had vanished. They were strangers in a strange time, forever 8 years old in a world that had moved on without her. Thomas Whitfield asked to see Platform 7 one more time. David Martinez, the station manager, walked with him through the modern station. Whitfield touched the walls, looked up at the electronic boards, tried to reconcile the place he'd known with what it had become. "I was supposed to retire next year," Whitfield said quietly. "Marion and I were going to buy a little house in Michigan, spend our days fishing and watching the seasons change. She did all that without me, didn't she?" Martinez nodded, unable to speak. "Did she have a good life?" Whitfield asked. "The records show she worked as a teacher," Martinez said. "She never remarried. She established a scholarship fund in your name for children of railroad workers. She waited for you." Whitfield smiled sadly. "That sounds like my Marion, always thinking of others." The scientific community remained baffled. Conferences were held, papers were published, theories were proposed and debunked. Dr. Whitmore's team detected residual temporal anomalies along the train's original route, suggesting that whatever had happened might happen again. The section of track between Elkhart and Toledo was closed permanently, declared too dangerous for rail traffic. But sometimes, late at night, railroad workers reported seeing lights in the darkness, hearing the distant whistle of a steam locomotive that shouldn't exist. Train 439 itself was placed in a secure facility, still operational, still defying explanation. Scientists continued to study it, hoping to understand the forces that had pulled it out of time and returned it 70 years later. 1 year after the train's impossible return, on October 23, 2025, a memorial service was held at Union Station. The survivors gathered with their new families, their old families, and everyone trying to make sense of what had happened. Margaret Hayes stood at a microphone, her voice steady despite her tears. "We lost 70 years, she said. "We lost our families, our friends, our entire lives. But we got something back too. We got proof that time isn't what we think it is. That sometimes, impossibly, people do come home." She pulled out her old diary, the one she'd been writing in on the train. "My last entry was about watching stars from the observation car, about hoping to arrive in time. I never imagined it would take 70 years, but I'm here. We're all here. We came home." The Continental Limited, Train 439, departed October 23, 1954, arrived October 23, 2024. The how and why remain mysteries that may never be solved. But 103 people who disappeared into the night came back to tell the impossible truth, that sometimes the midnight train does return,